All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ole Miss After Dark. I'm joined here by Sam Hutchens, the Ole Miss beat writer from the Clarion Ledger. Y'all probably saw him all over TV this weekend, right? He was up in Milwaukee, had a really cool weekend with his brother that covers Iowa State, and we're going to get to all that here in just a little bit. But Sam, I appreciate you joining me, man. I know you're a very busy man. How have these last few days been for you?
Yeah, for me and for everyone else, it on the beat, it already would have been crazy, right? But to have the blessing of my identical twin coming down and then CBS finding out about it and putting it on TV, it's truly been nuts. But man, I don't know how to top that last week. And I thought I might, because of course my identical twin covers Iowa State, and I thought for a little bit it might happen during football season with the bowl game.
Yeah,
Ole
yeah.
Miss kind of just missed the playoff. Iowa State lost in the conference championship game, but that didn't happen. So for it to happen here, that was one for the books. That was cool.
Yeah. But so look, there's been a lot of times here in the last several years for me personally where I thought, man, I feel old now. You had a tweet out. It was either Sunday night or Monday morning. I can't remember when you sent it out. You said that Ole Miss advances to the Sweet 16 for the first time since you were born. Is that true?
Yes, if it makes you feel any better, it was only by a matter of months. I was born in November of 2001 that year. But yeah, so I'm 23, and as long as I've been born, Ole Miss has not been to the Sweet 16 until now. So just by a few months, but heck, it made a good tweet. So
Yeah, it did. I read that and I thought, holy hell, man, you were getting up there quick. Because I was, let me see, I would have been 14 at that time. I remember watching Jason Harrison hit that shot against Notre Dame. And anybody that's ever listened to the show and hears me talk about basketball, Jason Harrison is the pinnacle for me in Ole Miss basketball. That is my ultimate dude. 5'5", could shoot the lights out, wasn't scared of anybody. To see him hit that shot as a 14-year-old, I was pretty excited. But yeah, it's been a long time, and now Ole Miss is back in the Sweet 16. But before I get to that, just kind of talk a little bit about your weekend in Milwaukee because you get to watch Ole Miss play this blue blood in North Carolina, right, and really handle the game for the most part. But then you have that really special Sunday with your brother covering Iowa State, and one of y'all gets to cover another game, right? You had a really good tweet about how there was a shot of you and your brother on CBS, and you said, this probably going to make some family holiday cards down the road. That had to be a really special moment to be able to share that with your identical twin brother.
yeah, and I guess it starts, I mean, on Selection Sunday, when before that I'd been texting with Ben and another guy on the Iowa State beat, and we thought, man, Iowa State's kind of looking like a 3 seed line. Ole Miss could slot into that 6. Who knows? But it was just a pipe dream, a hypothetical. So and I'm sure you were watching the show. Ole Miss popped up like so quick on the selection. So
Yeah,
I'll tell you,
yeah.
I had to get an instant story out right away. So I was looking down on my computer, and I didn't see that Iowa State had gotten sent there right after until. Of course, I was at Funky's, and then other beat reporters who knew I wanted to get matched up with Iowa State were, hitting my shoulder and all that. So it started
Yeah.
out there. It was crazy. And then, just like old times, we shared a hotel room because why not? And I think the best part of the week, because Ben and I still talk pretty much every day, and we're still so close, of course. The weirdest part wasn't, getting to hang out with Ben, because that almost felt normal, even though we live 11 hours away. But I think the best part was me getting to introduce Ben to my friends on the Ole Miss beat that have just heard about Ben, and then me getting to meet all his people on the Iowa State beat and kind of getting to cross-pollinate those worlds a little bit, because until September, we'd grown up having the exact same set of friends our entire life. And this is the first time that people like you know me, but you don't know Ben. So to get to introduce Ben to those people, it was really cool.
Yeah. I remember when you got hired on to Clarion Ledger. I reached out to you probably within a week of you getting hired. We've talked a few times since then and all. Had no idea that you had an identical twin brother until this past weekend. And but that's just such a cool story to be able to cover that with him, obviously. And probably kind of like you say, getting to cross pollinate, getting to meet some of his coworkers, him getting to meet yours, you, his, all that. Probably finally being able to put faces to names too, because I imagine, like you said, y'all are touched. Y'all probably talked a good bit, so y'all are finally able to put faces with names of who y'all were talking about.
Absolutely. I knew everyone from what Ben said and their Twitter profile picture. So I
Yeah.
didn't get to go with anyone else in that. But, that was, I wrote a story about it, and I was maybe a little hesitant to at first, but I called some people up and they said, you should write this story. It's really cool. So I wrote a column about it, and I had a line in there that, I said I kind of felt like I already knew those people, or more so they knew me. And I guess in a way they sort of did with knowing my identical twin, who despite living 11 hours away, we are still very, very similar. So that was cool. That in a way it kind of felt like they knew me a little bit. So that was cool.
Yeah. See, I've got a brother myself. We're only 15 months apart, so obviously not identical twins, but we're obviously really close as well. And if you didn't know we were brothers, you would never know we were brothers because we're nothing alike. We look nothing alike. Love each other to death, obviously. But it's definitely a different dynamic from that standpoint. So that's really cool. You were able to experience that, though. That was one of the stories from the weekend that really grabbed me, obviously. So happy you and your brother were able to experience that together. Now, from a broader picture, tell me about Milwaukee. How was your trip up there? You got to, as I said, watch Ole Miss beat a blue blood in North Carolina and this Iowa State team that always had these spurts of being really good, for several years, and then maybe they fall off a little bit, but then they come back. And this was a really good Iowa State team that Ole Miss beat.
I'm with you. And it definitely started like Tim Doyle wasn't the only one who had North Carolina, right? Like, that was a trendy pick. And I get it. Like when North Carolina, when they got to the title game against KU a couple years ago, they were, I think, like an 8 seed. So Carolina as a dog in the tournament, we saw what they did to San Diego State in the first 4, and you're thinking like, man, the Tar Heels could be a problem here. They could give Ole Miss all they want. And I guess they did. That was maybe the best half I'd ever seen the Rebels play this year. I guess they played so well in that Kentucky game when they had like 22 assists and turnovers. But I thought that was right up there with it in the first half. And then, you've seen the tournament, Derek. Like, we all knew there was a run coming. It was just how much would the run be? And so that was a heck of a game that it was 22 points and then it got cut. When Purdue hit that shot, it brought it back up to what did Padua's shot bring it back up to? I forget. I think it was 5.
Took it to 5 at that point. Yeah. It was a 2-point game before that one. It was an incredible comeback. I've heard people talk about like the Iowa State game. I'll use that as an example. Obviously, North Carolina falls into the same category of, they've never seen a more stress-free Ole Miss basketball game, right? And obviously, North Carolina made that big run, got within 2. Iowa State made their run as well and got it down to, 9 or 10, whatever it was there in the last couple minutes. And as soon as I heard multiple people say that's the most stress-free Ole Miss game they've ever watched against Iowa State, I thought I didn't feel that at all, because all I felt was there's a run coming. They're going to cut this sucker down just like North Carolina did, and Iowa State did the same thing. Again, you haven't been on the beat long enough to follow Ole Miss as long as I have. It always happens, Sam. I know what's coming. You're never comfortable. But credit to this Chris Beard team, and it's credit to Chris Beard in particular of how good of a coach he is, I think.
22 isn't safe. And then I did think it was ironic. Ole Miss ended up getting, at one point, up 22 on Iowa State as well. And I know I was kind of anticipating it to tighten up for sure. But I guess that's the thing about the Iowa State game, just from talking with, my twin and everyone else on that beat, is they said that Iowa State, I guess, they had trouble stacking good performances. And, like Milan, the guy that just killed Lipscomb and went off, their forward, he couldn't shoot against Ole Miss. And, you almost feel bad for guys like that. The story there was he'd had a great tournament earlier until the round of 32 or until the Sweet 16. And then he lost it. And it kind of happened again for him. So, Yeah, it took maybe a little while longer for me to kind of start writing up. Okay, I think I can start writing Ole Miss is going to win than some other people. But yeah, maybe about that 9-minute mark, or I mean, they don't show two random journalists on TV if it's a close game. So I guess at that point, you know.
Yeah, you got to fill airtime at some point, right?
Yeah.
You had a really good column come out after the game, obviously talking about the Iowa State game, and you had mentioned how that they had used the fraud from Tim Doyle as kind of motivation to fuel them, and this really great picture of Matt Morrell in his locker with the sunshades, right? Just an epic photo there with him, and but what he said I felt was true, that everybody has doubted this team all year long, right? You know, they always expected Ole Miss to fall off at some point, and Chris Beard and these players, they just kept putting their heads down, working, and you know they've gotten themselves to the Sweet 16, second one in Ole Miss history. Just kind of what have you seen from this group and this coaching staff from covering them all year long? I'm sure you're not surprised by this run since you've been around them so much.
Yeah, Beard likes to reiterate something that probably doesn't even make, you know, all our stories all the time. I guess because he says it so much, or you know, there's other things. But he's talked for this entire season about how when he was hired with Keith Carter, the conversation was not bring Ole Miss back to the tournament. The conversation was put Ole Miss on a run in the tournament. And I've found the way Beard frames March Madness so interesting. Because on the outside, it's, you know, all you need is one bad game and then you're out. And, you know, it's the hardest tournament, I think, for the favorite to win in sports. It's built on the madness, but the way Chris Beard breaks it down, I think really resonates with the team. He just says, you know, all you got to do is win 3 4-team tournaments. And that's all it is. That's all the bracket is he says you have to win 3 4-team tournaments. And so even, you know, when, at the podium after advancing to the Sweet 16. It was truly, it wasn't look at what we've accomplished, look at what we've done. Beard's mentality was very much like, we won the first tournament. We won the first miniature tournament, and now you're on to the next one in Atlanta. And man, who are we to doubt? Who are we to doubt a guy like Chris Beard, who he can just coach in the tournament, man? He's going against a guy January, February, Izzo. So he's going against a guy that we're talking about. But a dang good tournament coach. But I truly think, you know, Beard's a builder. He's great at building programs, but it may be getting to the point where he starts to specialize in the tournament. Just thinking back to that 2019 run and all that.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. By the way, I've heard Chris talk all throughout the year. I go back to like the Auburn game in Oxford earlier in the year. What was that, February the 1st or whatever that was? We played Auburn tooth and nail. Auburn played their best game of the year. You know, we were right there. Got blown out at Auburn. Had another really good game in the SEC tournament in Nashville with them, though. So 2 out of 3 times you've taken arguably the best team in the country down to the wire. And Beard's message after every one of those games was, you know, our goal, yes, we want to win these games, obviously. You never want to lose, but we've got to use this to set us up to win in March. That's where the wins count. We need to win in March. I thought it was interesting, though, that he broke it down into the 4-team tournaments like you talked about. I'd never heard that from a basketball coach. Me being a baseball guy, that's baseball slang for me, man. I mean, you talk about 4-team tournaments throughout a weekend. I mean, I've lived my entire life watching Mike Bianco play those things out in the postseason, right? But I never thought about it from a basketball standpoint, and I thought today that it's literally the College World Series bracket broken down into a basketball form when you do the 4 teams, then another 4, then the other 4, until you get to the national championship. So I did think that was interesting when he brought that up. Kind of like you said, though, with Beard, he wants to win in March. I'd watched a video right before we started recording from Zach Gelb. He was talking to Chris Beard about exceeding expectations at Ole Miss, getting to the Sweet 16. And he never missed a beat. He said, look, we haven't exceeded any expectations. My expectations is to play on that final Monday night for a national championship. Right now, we're just in the Sweet 16. And a lot of people probably think that's coach speak. You know, that's the stuff he's got to say. you've covered Chris Beard now for a year. I would assume you probably think like I do, because I initially thought it was coach speak until I've heard it so many times. That really is his mindset and the way he thinks, isn't it?
I think that's absolutely the right breakdown. And, it's I guess the proof is in the pudding a little bit with he's done this before. So like all the guys in the Ole Miss locker room, he can point to and say, hey, I took a senior laden team that didn't have maybe a ton of NCAA tournament deep experience. I took them to overtime of the national championship against Virginia. But yeah, there's a quote that he said it at the post-game podium in Milwaukee after Iowa State, but I'm going to use it in a story I have coming out shortly. I was just working on, and Beard, the conversation was about maybe internal expectations versus external expectations. And I think those are probably different, right? Like externally, Ole Miss making the Sweet 16, this whole town would take that. For this year, before the season, that's something that hadn't been done since I was born. But I truly believe, like you're saying, internally, I think the expectations are absolutely more than that. And Beard has said that, is Ole Miss winning the tournament probable? No. But Beard has said, is it possible? And he says, absolutely. And the quote that I was thinking of is Beard said, if I don't believe that Ole Miss can win it all, I shouldn't be the coach at Ole Miss. So I truly believe he thinks Ole Miss can win it all. And, with you beating Alabama, you've beaten Tennessee. This team may get blown out in Atlanta, and it, maybe Izzo moves on, but it doesn't feel like that's a guarantee at all that this team doesn't make the Final Four. It's just crazy what this combination of Beard and a lot of seniors and shooting 49% from three in the field this tournament, that always helps.
That helps.
But it's just great. This March is all about feel and the madness and the runs, and however Beard has done it, he's been able to capture it this year.
Yeah, and you were talking about us beating Alabama and Tennessee and all that. I was looking at it. Of course, Ole Miss fans got all up in the tizzy about Indy Cat's Sweet 16 power rankings and Ole Miss being down to 16, right? Whatever. I don't care what anybody thinks about our team and where they place us in power rankings. But just looking through the Sweet 16, Ole Miss wins at Alabama, so they're 1-0 against Alabama. They beat Tennessee at home, 1-0 against Tennessee. Beat Kentucky at home, 1-0 against Kentucky. Beat BYU at a neutral site. Beat Arkansas twice. One of those at a neutral site. This is a team that has won a lot of games against these Sweet 16 teams that are here. So they're battle tested. They played in the SEC. Greatest conference of all time this year. I was actually having a conversation with my dad not 30 minutes ago about how I feel like I didn't even give the SEC credit or as much credit as it deserved. I thought it was the best conference in the country this year, but I'm positive it is now the greatest conference of all time this one particular year. It was so tough. It was so demanding. And these guys went through that schedule and they handled it beautifully, go 10-8, come out on the other side. And you've seen that in this tournament. Iowa State, an incredible Big 12 team, right? One of the best in the entire country. And they dominated them for the majority of the game. North Carolina, one of the legendary programs in this sports history, and they go out and dominate them for, over half the game there to get to this Sweet 16. So Beard's done an incredible job of culture. Like you said, senior-led team, Morrell, Brakefield, those guys really bought in when Beard got there, and they did a really good job of meshing other players. Padula obviously has been out of this world so far for us. Juju's been good coming in. Last year, this is his second year. Dia, when he plays, that's when this machine really gets going. When Dia is rolling, this team rolls, right? So let's kind of look ahead a little bit. I know you'll be in Atlanta covering it. What do you see from Ole Miss going into this game Friday night against Michigan State?
Yeah, I'm grateful I don't predict March Madness for a living, just because that would, none of us would have a job, right?
Not very profitable.
Yeah. But I guess the first thing that jumped out to me is, in 2019, Beard played against Tom Izzo. Granted, that probably means very, very little, but it's fun for, guys like you and me to talk about it, right? And in that game, Chris Beard's defense clamped up the Spartans, and Texas Tech won that game as underdog in the seed. I don't know what Vegas had him at, but
Yeah.
Texas Tech won that game as an underdog. So I'm sure that's a thought, at least going through the mind of both coaches' heads a little bit. But yeah, so the Spartans, they're really good at 3-point defense, which has not been something Ole Miss has been overly reliant on this whole season. But in the tournament, it's been a real strength. As you mentioned, like what Dre Davis has been cooking from three. Malik Dia has just been like not missed. Malik Dia started jumping on his 3-point shots and he's still hitting them. He hasn't jumped on a three all
that. Yeah, I know.
And yeah, Padula's been nails when they need him to be from the 3-point line. So yeah, they're shooting 49% against the Tar Heels and the Cyclones. So that'll be something I'm watching. Does the law of averages come into play, and does Ole Miss have a bad 3-point shooting game against a good 3-point defense? And could that be a problem? I don't know. The Spartans rebound well too. They don't. Yeah, I think their leader has only averages like 7 point something a game. So not one Janai Broom or anything that's pulling in 13 a game, but they rebound really well as a team, which that's could be a problem for Ole Miss. But
that's a bugaboo of ours.
Yeah, but I don't know. The Spartans haven't looked great actually. I was going to ask, did you get a chance to watch Michigan State when they were playing New Mexico? Because I remember being in the arena and I was working on something. I couldn't watch any of that game. But did you get a chance to watch that game? Because they didn't look great.
I watched some of it. I got through most of the first half right before halftime. I ended up going to bed. I get up at 3:30 in the morning to go to work, so that thing was starting to drag on a little bit too long, as interested as I was. But look, I had the same thought. Like it was New Mexico was playing them so well at that point. I think they might have even been leading by the time that I decided to turn it off and go to bed. The very first thing I did when I woke up that morning was pick up my phone and pull up the ESPN app to see if Michigan State was able to pull it off or not. Michigan State, like you said, they're really good at defending the three. They're really good at rebounding, and it's not just one guy. It's a collective effort, and that is a staple of a Tom Izzo team. He does such a great job of getting his 5 guys to play the way that he wants them to, right? They're all going to be on the same page. They're all going to be in rhythm. I mean, there's a reason he's been at Michigan State for, 30 years or whatever it's been now. I remember when Ole Miss played them back when they had Mateen Cleaves. And, I was probably like, I don't know, 11, 12 years old then, and it's still burned into my mind, still gives me nightmares what they were able to do to us that night. But again, really good coach. He's going to get the absolute most out of his players. And like you said, January, February, Izzo. The dude wins in March. But so does Chris Beard. That makes it such a fun game and something we're really looking forward to. You're getting 2 of the best coaches in the country going head-to-head in a really, really high-leverage competitive game.
Absolutely. Well said. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be cool, and it truly feels like anything could happen, right? I think in my prediction story I had Michigan State winning just by a little bit, because I think Michigan State is better on paper. But
they are.
That's the thing about this bracket. That's why we're all ripping up our paper brackets, is because paper doesn't play out in March Madness. So, One thing that Ole Miss, I feel like, really needs to do, they've got to win the turnover battle. It's one thing they've been really good at so far this year. They've got to turn Michigan State over, and they've got to protect the ball themselves. Another thing they've been really good at, you don't have to shoot 50% from 3, but you probably need to shoot 37, 38%, something like that. To put enough pressure, and you don't have to out-rebound Michigan State, because we're just not going to. Look, if we out-rebound Michigan State, this sucker might be over by halftime. Yeah.
But if you can keep that thing within a 7-8 rebound margin, you're going to be in this game.
Yeah, especially if you make it up with the turnovers. Yeah, if you can make it up with the turnovers, then you're
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I heard a stat. I think Chase Parham gave it out, if I'm not mistaken. But Michigan State is like 300 and something in the country in creating steals or creating turnovers. I can't remember the exact wording. So that's something that really plays to one of Ole Miss's strengths, because, like I said, we don't turn it over a whole lot. If Michigan State's not pressuring you and forcing turnovers, then that means we're at least going to get opportunities on the offensive end, and we've got to take advantage of it. And then one way to kind of outweigh that rebounding discrepancy that's probably looming for us on Friday night. Look, just make all your shots. You ain't got to worry about rebound at that point, right? Just put it in the bucket.
It's easy to get those rebounds when they come through the net. Those are usually uncontested.
That's right. That's right. All right, Sam. Well, look, dude, I'll go ahead and get you out of here, man. I appreciate you joining me here. That was a lot of fun. Safe travels on your way to Atlanta, and hopefully you are covering 2 more games this weekend. Nothing would tickle me more. And then we could ship you off to San Antonio and cover a Final Four, maybe.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun. I appreciate it.